Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this presentation of Promore Pharma's result for the second quarter of 2020. The presentation today will be held by CEO Jonas Ekblom and resigning CFO Jenny Björnupsson and the new CFO Erik Magnusson. My name is Pascal Detwiller and I'm an analyst at Västerhamnen Corporate Finance. Västerhamnen has the pleasure of hosting this web conference since we're covering Promore Pharma with our commissioned research. We will begin with a presentation of the second quarter and thereafter follows a Q&A session. To ask questions, you can use the chat function in the webinar tool. Also feel free to use the chat function during the presentation and I will ask the questions when the presentation has finished. This web conference will, and including the Q&A, will be recorded and the recording will later be available on Promore Pharma's website. So with that said, I will give the word to you, Jonas.
Thank you very much. Promore Pharma is a small pharmaceutical innovation company. We are based in Stockholm and we are traded on Nasdaq First North. And since we're public, we include this disclaimer about forward-looking statements. Sorry for that. We're having problems with the page transition here. Okay, here we go. Which button was it? Okay, thank you very much. So let me first start by introducing our most recent team member, Erik Magnusson, who very recently has joined us as Chief Financial Officer for the company. Perhaps I can ask you, Erik, to, with a few words, describe your background.
Sure. Thank you. I've been working in the financial industry for more than 15 years, and then in the past 10-12 years, I've also acted as a CFO in a small biotech company, non-listed, and also in a number of positions as business controller lately at Coop Online.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So let's see here. It was
yesterday.
Very good. So for those of you who are not familiar with the company, we have two main development initiatives. These are two therapeutic peptides that we are developing for two indications where there are no existing prescription pharmaceuticals. The project where we've reached the most advanced stage is ensereptide. It's a product candidate aimed for prevention of adhesions after surgical repair of tendons. So an emergency surgery type of product. And here we deem that there are approximately 1 million patients on the mature pharmaceutical market, so in the European Union, North America, and Japan. The other project, ropocamptide, is a product candidate that is aimed for treatment of the most common type of chronic leg ulcers, the so-called venous leg ulcers. And here we are looking at a target population of more than 6 million patients on the mature pharmaceutical markets. And both of these opportunities represent very significant market potentials. So few words about the mode of our pharmaceutical products. So these are peptides that we have developed for local delivery, and since they are delivered locally, we have a couple of very strong and important advantages that differentiates us from many other types of pharmaceutical treatment modes. So one advantage is that with local delivery, you ensure that you always have appropriate bioavailability. We can make sure that the drug is available in the tissue compartment where it's supposed to exert its action. And also there's a very strong safety component to this because these peptides are generally very unstable in tissue fluids and in the bloodstream. So by administering these locally in a small dose and a small volume, the likelihood that we will have systemic exposure and systemic adverse events is almost non-existent. In fact, for both of these products, the systemic exposure, the concentrations in the bloodstream is not quantifiable with modern analysis tools. I'm going to talk a few words about each one of these projects. So we'll start with ropocamptide, which is the project where we actually have a very intensive ongoing activity. So the product that is aimed for treatment of venous leg ulcers. So venous leg ulcers constitute the largest category of chronic or hard-to-heal wounds. It's estimated on the traditional markets, so North America, Europe, and Japan, that these type of ulcers are equivalent to approximately 40% of all chronic wounds. In other developing countries, the diabetes leg ulcers are likely more common, since diabetes surveillance, treatment, and monitoration is insufficient in countries like Brazil, Mexico, India, Indonesia, etc. But on the mature reimbursed markets, the VLUs are the dominating type of wounds. And just as a reference point, we have found published data indicating that in average, the treatment of one venous leg ulcer episode can cost more than 100,000 Swedish crowns. So there's a large potential health economic benefit of treatment like this. Today, there are no pharmaceutical prescription products, and the standard care for these type of patients constitute compression bandaging. Words about the product concept. So this, the active ingredient is a naturally occurring peptide, LL37, also sometimes referred to as cathelicidine, which is a multifunctional pluripotent peptide. It's antimicrobial, so it kills bacteria and fungi. It's angiogenic, so it stimulates the formation of small blood vessels in the dermis. And we think what's most important for the healing effect of LL37, it stimulates the migration of certain cells that are important for the closure of a wound. LL37 seems to play a very important role in wound healing, and in acute wounds, you get a rapid increase in the local concentrations of LL37, while in chronic or hard-to-heal wounds, it seems like the wound bed is depleted in LL37. So we look at this as a supplementation therapy where we're adding LL37 in wounds that lack this peptide. And the treatment modality that we're using entails 2 to 3 weekly application of this viscous hydrogel, and this can be done in conjunction with a regular dressing change. These patients normally come into a primary care facility or a wound clinic a couple of times per week, and we think that frequency is appropriate for application of ropocamptide. We have an ongoing study, and we're going to talk a little bit more of where we are in that study, but the objective of this study was originally to bring in 120 patients that complete the protocol, essentially that complete the treatment period. And the treatment period in this study is 3 months, followed by a follow-up period of 4 months. And the structure and design of this study corresponds to what medical authorities both in the United States and in Europe see as the type of study design that is required to demonstrate the efficacy and safety of a product like this. We announced that we had reached the last patient last dose in March of 2020, so that's something we reported in conjunction with financial report for the first quarter. What we've done since then is we have completed the follow-up phase of the study that was done now in July. So at this point in time, we have completed the recruitment period, we have completed the treatment period, we have completed the follow-up period. So essentially everything where we interact and record data from patients is behind us. And we are very thankful that we were able to do the vast majority of these efforts before the COVID-19 epidemic. Had we been 1 or 2 months later, it's very likely that we might have needed to actually redo this study. But we were very lucky in the sense that we were able to complete the treatment period before the epidemic started to have an impact on the availability of the clinics that we are utilizing for this study. Now, what we're looking forward prospectively is to have a database lock sometime towards the end of the third quarter. So towards the end of September, we deem that we will be able to do that, and to conduct statistical analysis after that. So at this point in time, We have cleaned up the database, but the data is not unblinded. So we don't know, the study participants don't know, the physicians that have participated in the study don't know the data yet. That is something that we will start with towards the beginning of the fourth quarter to make the analysis. And we deem that we will have a clinical study report from which we will be able to announce top level data sometime in the November, December timeframe, so towards the end of this year. So we're following the plan on this very exciting project that, if we were to be successful, I think will be a major value inflection point for Promore Pharma. A few words about the other project, and I just want to emphasize that we raised some capital in the fourth quarter of last year, and we chose to raise a smaller amount than we had originally anticipated. And for that reason, the monetary resources we have, we've chosen to focus those to complete the LL37 dropcamptide study. While we're waiting data for that, we are doing some preparatory work on ensereptide, which is a phase 3 study. So our next capital increase that we're looking at, we aim to raise capital to be able to start a phase 3 clinical study on this peptide, and I'll say a few words about this. Here we're dealing with the area of adhesions and scars, and the vast majority of these type of medical conditions are caused by fibroblastic adhesions, so one cell type that cause collagen formation, that cause permanent bonds between tissue surfaces that should not adhere. So on the lower right-hand side here, we see an example of a cross-section of a tendon that has been sutured, and sometime after the suturation process, fibroblasts have leaked in the area between the tendon and the tendon sheets. So normally you should have a space here with synovial fluid like you have on the upper side here to allow flexibility and good gliding function of the tendon. But here you see that we have a permanent adhesion that restricts the mobility. And in case this happens, let's say in hand or finger, it results in permanent restrictions in mobility and flexibility after the injury. And it's deemed that up to 50% of patients that undergo surgery in fingers or the hand can get some level of permanent immobilization of the finger. A few words about the project concept here. We are working with pre-filled syringes. These syringes contain the PXL01 peptide, the ensereptide peptide. This is a 25-mer peptide that is derived from a human protein. So this peptide is naturally occurring in some tissue fluids, and for instance in breast milk. The peptide has a very unique combination of two properties that we think are very important for its ability to prevent these type of adhesions. So it's potently anti-inflammatory, but with a different mechanism of action than, for instance, corticosteroids. While corticosteroids in theory could be used to prevent these type of adhesions, corticosteroids weaken the strength of the tendon while healing. This peptide is anti-inflammatory, but it does not impede the strength of the tendon. And aside from that, it's also pro-fibrinolytic, which is another important mechanism of action to prevent scarring. And we have today, the product consists of a product kit where we have one syringe containing the ensereptide peptide and another syringe that contains a viscous carrier, which is hyaluronic acid. And right before the surgery, these two syringes are mixed together and then applied as a one-time application with a syringe without the needle. So it's not a regular injection, it's an application on top of the repaired tendon before synovium and the skin is sealed. The study protocol that we have outlined for this study entails the recruitment of 600 to 700 patients. And we are looking to do a study where patients are followed for up to 12 months after surgical procedure and the one single application of the product. We have identified and made agreements with study centers in a number of European countries, so Sweden, Germany, Poland, Italy, as well as India. In India, we have regulatory approval to start, while in Europe, we have not yet filed the clinical trial application. And while we are in this waiting mode to raise sufficient capital to start this study, we are doing some preparations in this project, and we are particularly focused on the supply chain of the product kit, which actually is a quite complex process. So we're taking the time to improve the quality of this supply chain. A few words about the preparation status. There are a number of documents that are quite extensive that are required in order to start the clinical trial. So we have completed the ID, the investigator's brochure. We have completed the clinical study protocol, and we have vetted this in discussions with key opinion leaders, so hand surgeons, and in dialogues with competent authorities. So in Sweden, the Medical Products Agency, and also medical agencies in other countries. We are almost done with the manufacturing dossier, so the investigative medicinal products dossier. To give a number on that, we are approximately 90% completion on that document. And as I mentioned, we have made arrangements with a number of clinical sites that we think will be sufficient for this study. We have a study organization that is established and aligned. So we have a main full service CRO, clinical research organization. We have assigned a coordinating investigator, and we have a number of subcontracts for various functions. And while we are waiting for financing to trigger this, we are improving the manufacturing setup for this product. I should also say, typically it's an ethical demand for a company like us to raise sufficient capital to be able to complete the clinical treatment phase of a study like this. So you don't want to raise funds in tranches for a study like that. It's considered an ethical necessity to have the monetary resources to complete a study like that. That's why we are in somewhat waiting mode with this project. Now we have a few slides about our company in general and the finances, and I think I will leave this over to you, Erik, to comment on. So please.
Yeah, the EBIT in the quarter was minus 6.7 million compared to minus 7.4 million last year. And then the EBIT for the first half this year was minus 14 million compared to minus 12.9, i.e. no major changes. We have slightly lower R&D costs in this quarter compared to last year, and that is due to lower cost in our HEAL L37 study. Although then we have higher accumulated costs in the first half, but this is according to the plan and due to the nature of the study, really. We also have slightly lower consultancy fees and traveling expenses in the quarter and in the first half. The cash flow in the period was minus 6.0, which means that the cash position at the end of the quarter was 39.9 million. Some words about us and the COVID-19. As Jonas said, we have not yet had any major impact by the pandemic, although we of course realize there are certain risks that could apply. For example, delayed interactions with authorities, limitations in our contacts with healthcare institutions, hospitals, etc., capacity limitations of subcontractors, change priorities at other companies in concluding license agreements, etc., and uncertainties in the capital markets that may have implications for future capital raises. Those are the main risks as we see it.
Thank you, Erik. So In conclusion, we are a company, although being small, we have two projects that are remarkably late in the pharmaceutical development chain. We work with two indications, or two primary target indications, where there are no pharmaceutical prescription products today. So it's a blue ocean type of market space that we're looking at. We have strong patent protections for both of our programs. We have several patent families, and we have a runway that is up to 2037 in our longest runway. We have extraordinary safety profile for this program, since it's local administration, meaning that we have a very, very small likelihood to fail because of systemic adverse events, which quite common is one of the most common reasons for failures in phase 3. We do not have that risk. We also have very limited development costs, particularly for the PXL01 programs. Our projected phase 3 cost there is among the lowest that you see among all therapeutic areas. We're working in a rapidly growing space that is referred to as bioactive wound care. So it's the fastest growing subspace of the larger general wound care market. And we are a very small team. Essentially, it's the three of us that you see on the picture in the first slide, and we're working with external consultants that we can use on a as needed basis only. So we don't have a large corporate overhead, and we have a couple of important strategic partnerships in place that allow us to develop other aspects of the company or of our project portfolio. So that concludes our summary and presentation today, and I want to turn it back to you, Pascal.
Thank you for that presentation. So then we move on the agenda to the Q&A session. So this means that everybody can ask questions. You can either write in the chat function, and I will read the question out loud to the company. If you want to ask your question through the microphone, you can also use the function to you just right click on the questions bar and you choose raise my hand, and then I'll give you I'll unmute your microphone and you can ask your question. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask them now. And while we wait for that, I have some questions on my own, so I'll go ahead and ask them. The first thing I'm wondering is, with the RoboCamptide project, if this is successful, you have communicated they have some different options on what to do next. One of them would be to find a licensing partner that will take it through the phase 3 trials. And what I'm wondering is, what kind could different kind of license takers be different could they be beneficiary in different aspects, not only looking at the monetary aspects, but in terms of when they can start the trials and the focus they will have on this project, and also the length of this study? Could this be different between which kind of license taker that you would potentially find for this project?
I think that is a very excellent question, actually, because a phase 3 package for a product like this would actually be quite a complex task to take on. It would be quite expensive. It would entail a fairly large number of patients, and there would be multiple studies required in order to at least accomplish a global rollout of a project like this. We think the commercial potential is very high, so it would be required to make multiple studies. So for us, it would be very important to find a partner that have the capacity to run these type of studies. You asked about the length of the study. We project that from start to finish, a study like this might take up to 3 years to accomplish. And as a short answer to your question, yes, it's not only the monetary rewards that are important, because the large upside for us would be that our license taker or strategic partner actually is successful with phase 3, so it reaches the market. That would generate the largest long-term income for our company, not just the signing fees or the development milestones.
Okay, thank you. And also regarding a phase 3 trial, I'm thinking now with the corona situation, and there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies that have put their medical development on hold because it's many of the patients are older and in risk groups, so they can't really perform them right now. Are you concerned that there would be some kind of backlog at these pharmaceutical companies or CROs that would maybe change their priorities? Maybe they would focus more on, for example, cancer or other diseases. Is this something that could affect you in the phase 3 trials?
Yeah, so the short answer is we actually don't know. Let me expand and give a couple of view angles here. One is that there's actually very few clinical trials that are going on in this specific indication area, so I don't think there is a competition for patients. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that if we, towards the very end of this year, have a positive outcome from the clinical trial that we're doing right now, supporting moving into phase 3, we still would need to do the business development phase of making an alliance contractually. The strategic partner would need to do the planning of the process. That could realistically take a year to do. So hopefully at the time when patients would be ready to be dosed, there is a vaccine for the coronavirus that could be applied for patients participating in a study like this. But of course, nobody knows the availability of CRO resources. What I can say, but that is just anecdotally, I get many requests from clinical research organizations that contact us and want to help us support the development. We of course don't engage in those studies because that would ultimately be the responsibility of our partner to work on.
Okay, thank you. I have one remaining question, and so I just want to point out one more time, if you have any questions of your own for the people attending, this would be a good time to ask those questions. My last question is, could you say something about the competition in this in the chronic wound healing market? Are you aware of any other clinical studies that has come as far as you have come already, or it would be interesting to know how you look at the competition of this kind of medical project?
Yeah, that it's actually a very interesting space. It's very large in counted in dollars and also counted in volume. There is today no leading product. So there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of medical device type of projects available, some of them with the global availability and some just in regional markets. But there is no front leader and there is no existing prescription pharmaceutical. There are a couple of phase 3 initiatives that are ongoing, but I believe that it would actually be advantageous for us if one or two other projects could reach the market before or at the time we reach the market, so we wouldn't need to break that barrier alone. So I actually think it would be an advantage for us to have a couple of prescription products available in this space. So that is the situation.
Thank you for that. That was the last question I had, and it does not seem that we have any other questions coming in. So with that said, I would like to thank you guys for presenting and answering my questions. And I would also like to thank the people that have attended and listening to this presentation and Q&A. And with that, this presentation is concluded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pascal, for hosting the event. Thanks.
Thank you.